We don't need anyone new. Powerful people always leave, or make everything worse. The innocent, trembling voice of a 5-year-old girl echoed through the luxurious salon of a multi-million-dollar superyacht as warm golden lights cast shadows on her defensive and wounded little face. She stood there clutching an old picture book tightly in her hands with her best friend beside her. Both girls were scared of the powerful man who had just brought a destitute young woman from the dark, rainy alleys of Chicago onto the ship. That Mafia boss had no idea that only hours earlier he had rescued a desperate woman from the freezing streets. But their journey had just begun, heading straight toward the Strait of Hormuz, where war tensions were exploding, ships were under threat, and the mere mention of closing the strait could turn this luxury yacht into a death trap in the middle of the ocean. Could one innocent sentence from a wounded child be powerful enough to shake the icy heart of a mafia boss, while their ship sailed straight into the most dangerous waters in the world? Or would those very words unleash the greatest emotional storm of all, forever changing the fate of 4 souls, caught between bullets and compassion? If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. Is it United States, London? Maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change life. In the crisp autumn air of October 2025, the city of Chicago hummed with its usual restless energy. Skyscrapers pierced the gray sky like silent sentinels, their glass surfaces reflecting the hurried lives below. Cars honked impatiently on rain-slicked streets, while the wind carried the faint scent of lake water and distant exhaust. Yet for one young woman, the world felt smaller, colder, and infinitely heavier. Sarah Thompson stood shivering at the edge of a dimly lit alley in one of Chicago's roughest South Side neighborhoods. She was 26 years old, fair-skinned with tired hazel eyes and hair pulled back in a simple ponytail that had long lost its shine. Her thin coat, patched in several places, did little to block the biting wind that whipped through the narrow passage between crumbling brick buildings. She clutched a worn backpack, containing the only possessions she still owned: a few changes of clothes, a small Bible her late mother had given her, and a faded photograph of better days. Sarah's life had unraveled slowly at first, then all at once. Her father had left when she was a child, leaving her mother to struggle with low-paying jobs and mounting medical bills. When her mother passed away 2 years earlier from untreated illness, Sarah had dropped out of community college to work double shifts as a preschool teacher's aide at a struggling inner-city daycare. The pay was barely enough to cover rent in a rundown studio apartment with leaking ceilings and noisy neighbors. Lately, even that fragile thread had snapped. The daycare had closed due to funding cuts, and her landlord had evicted her after she missed 2 rent payments while caring for her younger brother, who was now staying with distant relatives. For the past 3 weeks, Sarah had been living on the streets. She slept in shelters when she could find a bed, or huddled in doorways on colder nights. Hunger gnawed at her constantly. Her once soft cheeks had hollowed, and her frame had grown painfully thin from days of eating whatever scraps she could find at soup kitchens or behind grocery stores. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by the cold, the fear of strangers, and the relentless worry about her brother's future. She felt powerless, humiliated by the way passers-by sometimes averted their eyes or clutched their bags tighter when she approached, asking for spare change. The world seemed to have decided she was invisible, or worse, a burden. Tonight the injustice felt particularly cruel. Earlier that evening, after spending hours filling out job applications at a public library, Sarah had returned to the alley where she had hidden a small bundle of belongings. She found it gone stolen by someone even more desperate than she was. Tears stung her eyes as she sank down against the cold brick wall, her thin legs drawn up to her chest. "Why does everything have to be so hard?" she whispered to herself, her voice soft and trembling. A wave of dizziness washed over her. Her head spun, and for a moment the alley blurred. She pressed her palms to the rough ground to steady herself, feeling the sharp sting of gravel against her skin. Fear coiled in her stomach, mixed with a deep, aching numbness. How much longer could she endure this? Unbeknownst to Sarah, eyes were watching her from the shadows across the street. Vincent Vin Harlan sat in the back of a sleek black SUV parked near the intersection. He was a tall, fair-skinned man in his early 40s with sharp blue eyes that had seen too much, and a jawline hardened by years of calculated power. Vin had built a vast empire in the United States. one that blended legitimate success in construction and international import-export, with a hidden network of influence that commanded respect and fear in certain circles. His wealth was immense private jets, multiple homes, and the luxury superyacht the Horizon, currently docked at a secure marina on Lake Michigan prepared for an urgent voyage. Yet money had never bought him peace. Vin's heart carried heavy burdens. The death of his brief past love, a woman from a struggling background, had left him with unspoken regrets. He had walked away years ago, fearing his dangerous life would endanger her, and the child she carried, a child he had only recently learned might exist through scattered documents uncovered by his private investigators. Guilt gnawed at him like a constant shadow mixing with remorse that sometimes woke him in the dead of night. He had rescued others before pulling vulnerable people from the streets into his protection when it served his interests or quieted some inner storm. But tonight felt different. As he watched the frail young woman in the alley, something stirred deep within him, an overwhelming surge that caught him off guard. His driver, a loyal associate, spoke quietly. "Boss, that's the one the tip mentioned. Sarah Thompson, the preschool aide who lost everything. She's been on the streets for weeks." Vin's gaze remained fixed on Sarah. He saw the way her shoulders slumped in defeat, the quiet dignity she still tried to hold on to, even as exhaustion etched lines on her young face. A fierce inner conflict raged inside him. Part of him wanted to drive away to maintain the emotional walls he had built to survive his world. Another part, stronger and more insistent, felt a powerful pull, a deep compassion mixed with an intense, almost paternal instinct to protect. This woman reminded him of the vulnerability he had once ignored in his own past. The thought of her suffering alone tore at him violently, creating a storm of remorse and determination. "Pull up closer," Vin ordered, his voice low but commanding. The SUV glided forward. As the vehicle stopped at the mouth of the alley, Sarah looked up, startled. Her heart raced with sudden fear and confusion. Who were these men? She pushed herself to her feet unsteadily, her legs weak from hunger and cold. Dizziness returned, and she leaned against the wall for support, her vision swimming for a terrifying moment. Horror flickered through her mind. Was this another threat? Another cruel twist in her already unbearable life? Vin stepped out of the car, his tailored coat open to reveal an expensive shirt. He moved with the quiet authority of a man who commanded rooms without raising his voice. Yet when he spoke to Sarah, his tone softened in a way that surprised even him. "Miss Thompson," he said gently, "my name is Vincent Harlan. I understand you've been through a great deal. You don't have to stay here tonight." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. Her voice came out timid and polite, barely above a whisper. "Sir, I don't know you. How do you know my name?" She felt a rush of anxiety, her hands trembling as she clutched her thin coat tighter. Curiosity warred with fear. This man looked wealthy, powerful, completely out of place in her broken world. Why would someone like him notice her? Before Vin could answer, tension erupted from the other end of the street. Two figures from a rival faction, men who had been circling Vin's operations for weeks, stepped into view. They had been tailing his vehicle, hoping to catch him in a moment of weakness. One called out mockingly, "Harlan, you slumming it now. Picking up strays won't save your deals." Vin's expression hardened, but he did not raise his voice. A brief, tense confrontation unfolded. Words were exchanged sharply, accusations of encroaching on territory flying like invisible blades. Vin stood firm, his presence alone enough to make the rivals hesitate. He motioned subtly to his associates, who positioned themselves protectively without drawing weapons. The rivals backed off after a few heated moments, disappearing into the shadows with muttered threats. The encounter left Vin's chest tight with frustration and a fresh wave of inner turmoil. How many more shadows from his world would threaten the fragile lives around him? Turning back to Sarah, he extended a hand, carefully keeping distance to avoid frightening her further. "Those men are gone. You're safe. I have resources. A place where you can rest, eat, and find your footing again. No strings attached beyond my word." Sarah hesitated, her mind spinning in confusion and disorientation. Part of her wanted to run to cling to the little independence she still had. But the cold wind bit deeper, and the memory of her empty stomach and sleepless nights overwhelmed her. Tears welled in her eyes as she thought of her brother and the unfairness that had stripped her of everything. I don't have anywhere else," she admitted softly, her voice breaking with quiet despair. She felt humiliated, exposed in her poverty, yet a tiny spark of hope flickered amid the numbness. Vin felt the surge again, stronger this time, an intense, protective instinct that bordered on fierce love born of compassion. In his heart, a violent, emotional conflict raged, the ruthless man who had built an empire through control, versus the deeper part of him that yearned to shield this vulnerable soul from further harm. Guilt from his past amplified the feeling. He saw in Sarah not just a woman in need, but a reminder of the child he might have failed years ago, a child whose existence now haunted his every quiet moment. He guided her gently toward the SUV, ensuring she was comfortable in the warm leather seat. As the vehicle pulled away from the alley, Sarah stared out the window, her thin hands folded in her lap. The city lights blurred past a stark contrast to the luxury surrounding her. She felt dizzy again, overwhelmed by the sudden shift from utter misery to unexpected safety. Fear lingered, but so did curiosity and a confusing warmth. Vin sat across from her, his blue eyes watching with quiet intensity. Inside, his remorse deepened. He thought of the superyacht, the Horizon, waiting at the marina, prepared for a high-stakes voyage that would take them through dangerous international waters amid rising tensions. The Strait of Hormuz had grown increasingly volatile by October 2025, with threats of closures and conflicts disrupting global routes. He had planned the journey to relocate sensitive assets and perhaps escape the tightening pressures on his world. Now an unplanned passenger would join them, this destitute young woman he had rescued from the streets. As the SUV headed toward the marina, Sarah's exhaustion finally caught up. Her head leaned against the window, eyes heavy. In the stillness of the car, a quiet, emotional moment settled between them. Vin's hand clenched subtly at his side, fighting the consuming inner storm. He had rescued her from the immediate danger of the streets and the rivals who lurked nearby. But deeper questions burned in his heart. Could he truly protect her in the dangerous path ahead? And why did the sight of her fragile resilience stir such a profound protective tenderness in a man who had long buried such feelings? The city faded behind them as they approached the flecked, glittering lights of the private marina. The Horizon loomed ahead, its sleek white hull and towering decks a symbol of the vast gap between their worlds. Sarah would soon step aboard, unaware of the children already waiting there, two little girls whose lives were about to intertwine with hers in ways no one could yet imagine. For now, in this moment of transition, Sarah felt a fragile sense of relief mixed with lingering anxiety. Vin felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders, along with a fierce determination to shield her from further pain. The journey was only beginning, but already the inner turmoils of both were growing more intense, setting the stage for healing neither had expected. The black SUV glided smoothly through the October 2025 night, leaving the shadowed alleys of Chicago's South Side behind like a fading nightmare. Streetlights cast long golden streaks across the wet pavement as the vehicle approached the private marina on Lake Michigan. The air carried the crisp chill of autumn, mixed with the faint, clean scent of open water. Sarah Thompson sat in the warm leather seat, her thin frame almost swallowed by the luxury surrounding her. Her patched coat felt even more threadbare against the soft upholstery, and her hollow cheeks flushed with a mix of overwhelming confusion and quiet fear. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, fingers trembling slightly. The sudden shift from the biting wind and concrete hardship to this heated, silent vehicle left her disoriented. Her head still spun with dizziness from earlier, a lingering numbness in her limbs that made her wonder if this was all a cruel dream. One moment she had been huddled against cold brick stomach, aching from days of meager scraps. The next, she was being driven away by a powerful stranger. Horror flickered in her chest. What if this was another unjust twist? Another way the world would strip her of the last shreds of dignity? Vincent Van Harlen sat across from her, his tall, fair-skinned frame relaxed yet commanding in the spacious cabin. His sharp blue eyes occasionally glanced her way, but mostly he stared out at the passing city lights, his jaw tight with inner turmoil. The rescue had ignited something fierce and unexpected in his heart, an overwhelming surge of protective compassion that burned with an intensity he had not felt in years. This destitute young woman, so frail and resilient, despite everything, stirred gnawing remorse from his past. He thought of the child he might have failed long ago, the single mother he had walked away from to shield her from his dangerous world. Guilt tore at him violently, a storm of self-reproach that made his chest ache. How many vulnerable lives had his choices indirectly harmed? And now, pulling Sarah from the streets, he felt a deep, almost paternal attachment forming passionate and intense from the very first moments. He wanted to shield her, to give her the safety his empire could provide. Yet the violent conflict raged inside the ruthless man who built wealth through calculated power, versus the man yearning to offer genuine protection without tainting her further. The disparity between their worlds pressed heavier with every mile. Sarah's poverty had been absolute and humiliating. For weeks she had endured thin, malnourished nights, where sleep came only in snatches amid howling winds that cut through her thin layers like knives. She had begged politely at soup kitchens, her soft, timid voice barely rising above a whisper when asking for a simple meal. Unreasonable injustices had piled upon her, the daycare closing without notice, leaving her without income. the landlord evicting her while she cared for her sick brother. Strangers stealing her last belongings while she searched for work. Each blow had left her feeling powerless and deeply pitiful, her once bright hazel eyes now shadowed with exhaustion and quiet shame. Yet here she was suddenly enveloped in warmth and wealth that felt almost absurd in its contrast. As the SUV turned onto the marina access road, another tense confrontation erupted without warning. Two dark sedans from a rival faction pulled alongside aggressively, their drivers flashing lights in a bold attempt to intimidate. One lowered a window and shouted across the brief gap, "Harlan, you think picking up strays makes you untouchable? Your moves in the import routes are costing us. Back off or we make things difficult." Vin's expression remained calm on the surface, but inside, a fresh wave of violent emotional conflict surged. His hands clenched subtly at his sides as remorse mixed with protective fury. He would not let these shadows touch Sarah, not after pulling her from the cold streets. He motioned to his driver with a quiet command, and the SUV accelerated smoothly, while his associates in a trailing vehicle handled the exchange with firm words and strategic positioning. No weapons were drawn, but the air thickened with suspense as the rivals veered away after a few sharp verbal warnings. The encounter left Vin's heart pounding with deeper torment. His wealth and power displayed in the seamless security and luxury of the moment only highlighted how his world constantly invited danger. He glanced at Sarah, whose eyes had widened in shock and anxiety. The unfairness of it all that even in rescue threats followed tore at him. Sarah's voice came soft and polite when she finally spoke, appropriate to her age and the overwhelming presence of the older, powerful man beside her. "Mr. Harlan, sir. Those men, were they looking for you? I don't want to bring trouble. I've already lost so much." Her words trembled with guarded curiosity and lingering fear. She felt a confusing numbness spread through her body again, a dizzy wave that made her grip the seat for balance. Part of her wanted to shrink back into the familiar misery she knew. Yet another part felt an unexpected attachment, forming a burning trust sparked by his calm protection. The mindset of someone who had been desperately poor, now suddenly shielded by immense wealth, created extreme psychological shock. It was disorienting almost violently, so as gratitude warred with suspicion in her heart. Vin turned to her fully, then his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of his inner struggle. "They are gone. You are not trouble, Sarah. You have endured enough unfairness already. My world has its shadows, but tonight my only concern is getting you to safety." His words carried deep emotional layers. Remorse gnawed at him for the life he had led, one that now forced him to navigate these confrontations even while offering help. The overwhelming surge of compassion toward her intensified a fierce inner highlight where he felt almost fatherly responsibility, a desire to protect this vulnerable soul as he wished he could have protected others in his past. The SUV arrived at the secure marina gates, which opened silently to reveal the gleaming superyacht, the Horizon. The vessel was a masterpiece of American engineering and wealth, over 200 feet of sleek white hull, multiple decks with tinted windows and lights that reflected like diamonds on the dark lake water. Crew moved efficiently, preparing for departure. Vin helped Sarah from the vehicle with careful distance, ensuring she felt no pressure. Her thin legs wobbled slightly on the dock, the pain of prolonged malnutrition making each step a quiet battle. She stared up at the yacht in shock and deep disorientation, her breath catching. This floating palace represented a world so far from her leaking studio and wind-filled alley nights that it felt unreal. As they boarded via the gangway, the initial challenge unfolded in the yacht's elegant main salon. Soft lighting illuminated polished wood and comfortable furnishings that spoke of quiet luxury. Two little girls waited there under the watchful eye of a crew member, Lily, Vin's biological daughter he had taken in after her mother's passing, and her loyal best friend Mia. Both were around 5 years old, vulnerable in their own ways, with wide eyes that held traces of past hardship. Lily clutched a well-worn copy of Goodnight Moon while Mia stood slightly behind her, already casting a wary glance at the newcomer. Sarah's arrival triggered an immediate wave of resistance. Lily turned away stubbornly, her small frame tense with the emotional shutdown that had followed her own losses. Mia crossed her arms, her voice carrying a child's blunt distrust. "We don't need anyone new. Powerful people always leave or make things worse." The girls' tantrums began softly at first, refusing the warm meal set out for them, pushing away blankets, and clinging to each other in silent protest. For Sarah, tasked implicitly with helping settle them as the new presence on board, it felt like another absurdly unfair blow. She had just been rescued from the streets, her body still aching from cold and hunger, yet here she faced the emotional walls of these children who mirrored her own inner turmoil. She knelt carefully near them, her voice soft and timid. "Hello, Lily. Hello, Mia. My name is Sarah. I know it's scary when things change suddenly. I've been scared too." Her words were polite and gentle, reflecting her psychology as a young woman who had endured so much yet still offered kindness. Inside, anxiety and fear churned violently. What if she failed, even at this small task? The humiliation of her poverty lingered. How could someone as broken as her offer comfort? Dizziness returned as she spoke, a numbing wave that made the luxurious salon blur for a moment. Vin watched from the doorway, his powerful frame silhouetted against the deck lights. The scene tore at his heart with increasing intensity. Seeing Sarah so thin and sleep-deprived extend patience, despite her own exhaustion, amplified his remorse. He felt a passionate, burning attachment to her well-being, a deep emotional upheaval that mixed guilt over his past with a fierce determination to create safety for all of them. The yacht's departure added external pressure. Radio updates warned of rising tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, where Iranian threats had disrupted shipping routes amid the ongoing conflicts of 2025. The Horizon was scheduled to navigate toward international waters, but the voyage carried risks that mirrored the inner storms aboard. A quiet, emotional stillness settled briefly as Sarah hummed a gentle lullaby, "You Are My Sunshine," her voice wavering but steady. Lily's tantrum eased into hesitant sniffles, and Mia's guarded posture softened just a fraction. Yet the challenge persisted. Another unjust ripple came when a crew report arrived: minor mechanical delays due to sudden weather forcing a brief hold at the marina. It felt absurdly unfair to Sarah, who longed for rest, but now sat amid unfamiliar luxury, her malnourished body protesting with waves of pain and numbness. Vin stepped closer, his presence commanding yet careful. "You do not have to carry this alone," he said quietly, his voice rough with inner conflict. The violent tearing in his heart grew remorse for bringing danger near her compassion that demanded he shield her, and a profound sense of responsibility toward the children and this rescued woman. His wealth surrounded them, the yacht's gourmet kitchen preparing warm meals, soft quilts available for comfort and security, ensuring no rivals could approach easily. Yet none of it erased the emotional weight. Sarah looked up at him, her hazel eyes filled with a mix of fear, curiosity, and the first sparks of overwhelming trust. "Thank you, sir, for seeing me when no one else did." Her words were timid and polite, but they carried deep, moving emotion. The mindset of sudden protection after extreme poverty created extreme psychological shock, a confusing, numbing surge that left her heart racing between gratitude and lingering guardedness. As the Horizon finally prepared to cast off into the dark lake waters, heading eventually toward more perilous routes, the initial challenges hung heavy. Tantrums quieted into uneasy sleep for the girls, but Sarah remained awake, wrapped in a soft blanket that felt like a dream against her chilled skin. Vin stood on the deck, the wind tugging at his coat, his blue eyes reflecting the city lights fading behind them. The inner turmoil in both their hearts intensified with every passing moment. His violent conflict between power and compassion, hers, between desperate poverty scars and the burning attachment to this unexpected safety. The voyage had truly begun, carrying 4 vulnerable souls, and one powerful man whose remorse and protective instincts would be tested in the days ahead. In the quiet, condensed stillness of the salon, with the gentle hum of the engines, a fragile hope flickered amid the emotional storms, small but real, like the first light before dawn. The superyacht, the Horizon, cut through the dark waters of Lake Michigan, under the October 2025 night sky, its powerful engines humming a steady rhythm that vibrated gently through the decks. The city lights of Chicago had long faded into a distant glow, replaced by the vast blackness of open water and the occasional distant shimmer of other vessels. Inside the elegant nursery suite on the upper deck, soft lamps cast a warm golden light over polished wood paneling and plush furnishings that spoke of effortless luxury. Yet for Sarah Thompson, the space felt both like a dream and a fragile cage. She sat cross-legged on the thick carpet, her thin frame still wrapped in the soft blanket Vin had provided earlier. Her hollow cheeks and shadowed hazel eyes told the silent story of absolute poverty that had nearly broken her. For weeks she had survived on the streets, enduring thin, malnourished nights where the cold wind sliced through her patched coat like invisible blades, leaving her shivering until her teeth chattered uncontrollably. Sleep had been a rare mercy, stolen in short, restless bursts in doorways or overcrowded shelters, constantly interrupted by fear of strangers or the sharp pain of hunger that twisted her stomach into knots. The humiliation had been deep and constant, the way people looked away when she politely asked for help. The way her body had grown so frail that even simple movements sometimes left her dizzy and numb. Now surrounded by the yacht's wealth-heated rooms, clean linens, and the faint scent of fresh flowers arranged in crystal vases, the contrast tore at her heart with violent intensity. It felt absurdly unfair, this sudden shift from utter powerlessness to being enveloped in comfort she had never known. The two little girls, Lily and Mia, tested her patience relentlessly through the long hours of the night. Lily, the 5-year-old with soft curls and wide eyes that still carried the weight of her own losses, refused to settle. She tossed in the comfortable bunk, pushing away the warm quilt with small, determined hands and letting out sharp whimpers that echoed through the suite. Mia, her loyal best friend, clung to her side, her own guarded expression mirroring deep distrust. "We don't need her," Mia muttered more than once, her voice carrying the blunt honesty of a child who had known too much instability in her short life. The girls' emotional walls were high, built from their own hardships, and they expressed it through tantrums that grew louder as the night deepened, refusing the warm milk offered, turning their faces away from gentle stories and filling the room with cries that pierced the quiet luxury. Sarah's voice remained soft and timid when she spoke to them, appropriate to her young age and the overwhelming presence of the powerful man who had rescued her. "It is okay, Lily. It is okay, Mia," she whispered gently, her tone polite even as exhaustion pulled at her. "I know change is frightening. I have been frightened too." She rocked them carefully in her tired arms, humming the familiar American lullaby, "You Are My Sunshine," with a voice that wavered from lack of sleep but never broke. Inside, her emotions churned in confusing, numbing waves. Horror and anxiety gripped her at moments. What if she failed these children and lost this fragile safety? Fear made her hands tremble as she wiped away their tears, and heightened curiosity flickered when she wondered why a man like Vincent Harlan would bring someone as broken as her aboard his plain world. At times, dizziness returned, a deep disorientation that made the luxurious room spin and her balance falter, reminding her sharply of the cold alley nights where she had nearly fainted from hunger and cold. The mindset of someone who had been desperately poor, now suddenly protected by immense wealth, created extreme psychological shock. Gratitude burned passionately within her, an overwhelming trust and attachment forming from the very first hours. Yet it warred violently with lingering suspicion and the humiliating memory of her powerlessness. From the shadowed doorway, Vincent Van Harlan watched in silence, his tall, fair-skinned frame still dressed in his tailored coat. The scene unfolded before him like a quiet movie of resilience and pain. Sarah's patience, despite her own malnourished frailty, stirred something profound and tearing in his heart. His wealth surrounded them all, the yacht's advanced stabilization that kept the room steady. Even as the vessel moved the gourmet kitchen, sending warm broth and soft bread for the children, the security team, ensuring no immediate threats could reach them. Yet none of it eased the gnawing remorse that consumed him. He thought of his past mistakes, the single mother he had walked away from years ago, to protect her from his dangerous life and the child who might be his own blood. Guilt tore at him with increasing violence, a storm of self-reproach that made his chest tighten painfully. Seeing Sarah so thin and sleep-deprived, yet offering kindness without resentment, ignited an overwhelming surge of protective love. Not romantic, but a deep, burning compassion and fatherly responsibility that felt almost violent in its pulpit intensity. He wanted to shield her from every unfair blow life had dealt, to give her the stability his empire could provide. Yet the inner conflict raged fiercely, the powerful man who had built success through control, versus the man haunted by how the world might endanger the very souls he now sought to protect. The hardship escalated as the night wore on. Another absurdly unfair event struck when a sudden radio alert crackled through the yacht's systems. A rival faction had somehow learned of their departure and sent a bold message via encrypted channels, a veiled threat demanding Vin reconsider certain import routes or face complications in the waters ahead. The confrontation was not physical but tense and unexpected, playing out in the bridge area where Vin stood with his crew. Voices rose in sharp, controlled exchanges as his associates pushed back firmly against the rivals' demands. Vin's presence alone carried weight, his calm authority forcing the distant voices to hesitate. Yet the encounter left him with fresh inner torment. How many more shadows from his life would reach out and risk touching Sarah and the children? The unfairness burned that even in this moment of offering safety, his power invited danger. He returned to the nursery suite, quietly standing just inside the door during a rare moment of condensed emotional stillness. Sarah had finally coaxed Lily and Mia into uneasy sleep, their small bodies curled under the soft quilts with the well-worn copy of Goodnight Moon tucked beside them. She sat slumped against the bunk, her thin shoulders rising and falling with exhaustion, eyes heavy but still watchful. The quiet settled like a fragile blanket, broken only by the gentle hum of the engines and the distant lap of water against the hull. Sarah looked up at him, her voice soft and polite. "They are resting now, Mr. Harlan, sir. It was hard, but they are safe." Her words carried deep, moving emotion, reflecting the violent tearing inside her, the the desperate poverty that had left her powerless, now clashing with the confusing warmth of being protected and valued. She felt a passionate attachment growing in intense trust that made her heart ache with both fear and gratitude. The psychological shock was profound. Someone who had endured cold, wind-filled nights and humiliating rejection was now sitting in luxury, caring for children, while a powerful man watched over them all. It left her numb, at moments dizzy, with the absurdity of it, yet hopeful in a way that felt almost painful. Vin nodded, once his sharp blue eyes softening with the weight of his own emotional upheaval. "You have done more than I expected," he said quietly, his voice rough with the inner storm. Remorse gnawed deeper as he saw the toll on her frail body, the way her hands still trembled slightly from malnutrition and sleeplessness. His love for her well-being burned with fierce intensity, a compelling focal point that drove his every decision. He felt violently torn between the ruthless success that had defined him and the profound responsibility he now carried toward this rescued woman and the vulnerable children. The disparity in their worlds only amplified the conflict his wealth displayed in the yacht's every detail, versus her pitiful history of enduring nights without shelter or food. As the hours stretched toward dawn, more small challenges arose. Lily woke once with a sharp cry triggered by a bad dream, and Mia joined in with guarded resistance, refusing comfort at first. Sarah persisted, gently humming again and offering the soft teddy bear keepsake she had noticed the girls treasured. Her own body protested with waves of pain and dizziness, a humiliating reminder of how close she had come to breaking on the streets. Yet she did not yield her timid voice, whispering encouragement even as tears of exhaustion threatened to fall. In the quiet, condensed stillness that followed each wave of hardship, Vin's heart tore more intensely. He stepped onto the deck briefly, the cool lake wind tugging at his coat as he stared into the darkness. The yacht's luxury, its powerful navigation systems, comfortable quarters, and loyal crew stood in stark contrast to the misery Sarah had known. Unreasonable injustices from her past replayed in his mind: the sudden closure of her workplace, the eviction while she cared for her brother, the theft of her last belongings. Each memory evoked deep sympathy, stirring tears he would never show outwardly. His remorse grew consuming, mixed with a burning determination to ensure no further unfairness touched her. Sarah, alone with the sleeping children for a moment, leaned her head back and closed her eyes. The overwhelming trust and attachment she felt toward her rescuer created a passionate inner surge that left her disoriented and numb. From deep suspicion in the alley to this fierce burning reliance on his protection, her emotions shifted violently, tearing at her with confusing intensity. She whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, her soft voice barely audible, reflecting the mindset of someone who had been powerless and was now suddenly held in the circle of safety provided by a wealthy, powerful man. The horizon continued its steady course, the challenges of the night forging small but meaningful bonds amid the hardship. The inner turmoils of both Sarah and Vin grew ever more intense with every passing hour, his violent conflict between power and compassion, hers between the scars of poverty and the profound attachment forming in the warmth of unexpected protection. Dawn would bring new uncertainties, but for now, in the quiet, emotional stillness of the nursery, persistence had carved a fragile path forward, hinting at healing neither had dared to imagine. The superyacht The Horizon continued its steady progress across the waters in the crisp October 2025 days, the vast expanse of Lake Michigan giving way to more open routes as preparations intensified for the longer voyage ahead. The vessel's sleek decks gleamed under the autumn sun, its powerful navigation systems and luxurious amenities, a constant, almost overwhelming reminder of the immense wealth that surrounded them. Yet below the surface of polished wood and soft lighting, the emotional storms aboard refused to calm. Sarah Thompson moved through the nursery suite with quiet determination, her thin, malnourished frame still bearing the marks of the absolute poverty she had endured for so many weeks. Her body told the story without words. Hollow cheeks from prolonged hunger shadowed hazel eyes, heavy with the exhaustion of countless cold, wind-filled nights spent shivering in alleys or overcrowded shelters. Sleep had been a luxury she could rarely afford, interrupted by sharp pains of emptiness and the constant fear that left her dizzy and numb. The humiliation had cut deepest in those moments, when she had to beg politely for scraps, her soft voice barely rising as strangers turned away or offered only pity. Unreasonable injustices had piled upon her like cruel weights. The sudden loss of her job at the inner-city daycare, the eviction notice that came while she cared for her younger brother, the theft of her last few belongings on a night when the wind howled mercilessly. Each event had left her feeling deeply pitiful and powerless, stripping away dignity until she wondered how much more a single soul could bear. Now in the safety of the yacht, those memories clashed violently with the comfort around her. The disparity tore at her heart with increasing intensity. The soft family quilts, the well-worn copy of Goodnight Moon that the girls treasured, the warm meals prepared in the gourmet kitchen, all symbols of a world so far removed from her leaking studio and freezing streets. At times, she felt desperate and guarded her poverty, a humiliating shadow that made her question whether she truly belonged here. At other moments, confusion and fear washed over her in waves, leaving her disoriented with dizziness, causing the elegant room to spin and a numbing pain to settle in her limbs. Yet curiosity flickered too, a hesitant wonder at the powerful man who had pulled her from the abyss. The afternoon brought the first real test of connection on the open deck area, safely enclosed and shielded from the wind. Sarah had suggested a gentle activity to coax the girls from their shells. A simple safe play session with buckets of fresh water drawn from the yacht systems, soft sponges and colorful crayons for drawing on large waterproof sheets. She knelt carefully on the padded deck surface, her voice soft and timid as she addressed the children. "Look, Lily. Look, Mia. We can make happy pictures together. The water is just for splashing a little like a game. It is safe here." Lily, the 5-year-old with her father's sharp blue eyes hidden behind layers of withdrawal, hesitated at first, her small hands clutching the teddy bear keepsake. Mia stood protectively beside her, her expression guarded and distrustful. "We do not play with strangers," Mia said bluntly, echoing the fears of a child who had known too much instability. The tantrums threatened to return, small whimpers building as Lily pushed away the bucket. Sarah felt a surge of anxiety and horror. What if her efforts only made things worse? Her own exhaustion made the moment heavier. A wave of dizziness caused her to steady herself against the deck, railing the pain of malnutrition, reminding her sharply of how powerless she had once been. From a shaded vantage point on the upper deck, Vincent Van Harlen observed the scene in silence. His tall, fair-skinned frame remained still, but inside a violent emotional conflict raged with growing ferocity. His wealth was on full display, the superyacht's advanced stabilization that kept the deck steady, the crew discreetly providing warm drinks and blankets, the security systems monitoring every approach. Yet this luxury only amplified his gnawing remorse. He thought of the single mother from his past, the child he had learned might be his own blood, and the choices that had left him haunted by failure. Seeing Sarah so frail and sleep-deprived, yet kneeling patiently with the girls, ignited an overwhelming surge of protective compassion, a deep burning attachment that felt almost paternal in its intensity. It was love born of responsibility, fierce and passionate from the earliest moments of the rescue. The inner tearing grew more violent, the powerful man who commanded empires and navigated dangerous rivalries, versus the man consumed by remorse, desperate to shield this rescued woman and the vulnerable children from any further harm. How could his world of shadows ever be safe for souls as fragile as these? The breakthrough came unexpectedly during the play. Sarah dipped her hand into the bucket and splashed gently, her movements slow and inviting. A few drops landed on Lily's arm. The little girl froze, then let out a sharp, bright squeal, not of fear, but of genuine surprise and delight. Mia's eyes widened, and soon both girls were giggling their small hands, slapping the water in careful splashes that sent harmless droplets flying. Sarah laughed softly with them, her timid voice warming as she encouraged, "See, just a little fun. You are both so strong and bright." The sound of their laughter rang across the deck like a fragile melody, the first real joy the girls had shown since boarding. The moment created a quiet, condensed emotional stillness. Sarah sat back on her heels, tears of relief glistening in her eyes as she watched Lily lean forward to draw a simple crayon picture. A big figure with outstretched arms labeled in childish scrawl as the strong man who keeps us safe. Mia joined in her guarded posture, softening as she added colorful splashes to the sheet. For Sarah, the scene brought extreme psychological shock mixed with overwhelming trust. Someone who had endured humiliating poverty, cold winds, and absurdly unfair losses was now part of this gentle happiness, protected and valued by a wealthy, powerful man. The attachment burned intensely within her, a passionate reliance that left her heart racing between lingering fear and profound gratitude. Dizziness returned briefly, a numbing wave of disorientation, as the contrast between her past misery and present safety threatened to overwhelm her. Vin felt the impact like a physical blow. He stepped closer to the railing, his sharp blue eyes fixed on the scene below. The girl's laughter stirred something long buried, cracking the walls around his heart. Remorse tore at him more fiercely than before, guilt over his past abandonment, the dangers his life still invited, and the unfair burdens Sarah had carried alone. His emotional upheaval toward her deepened into a compelling focal point, a fierce protective love that demanded he ensure no more unjust suffering touched her or the children. The violent inner conflict escalated power and control, clashing against the raw need to offer genuine healing and stability. His wealth intensified the moment the deck's luxurious setup, the crew ready to provide anything needed, the vessel's ability to offer sanctuary amid growing external tensions. Yet drama intruded even in this tender breakthrough. A sudden radio alert from the bridge reported another bold confrontation. Rival factions monitoring maritime movements had sent an encrypted challenge questioning Vin's route and hinting at interference if he did not yield on certain business territories. The exchange played out in tense voices over the secure line, sharp words exchanged without physical escalation, but the suspense thickened the air. Vin responded with calm authority, his presence alone, forcing the rivals to retreat after heated verbal pushes. The unfairness stung deeply that even here in this moment of fragile joy, shadows from his world threatened to intrude. Sarah looked up as Vin approached the deck area, her voice soft and polite. "Mr. Harlan, sir." They laughed. For a moment they were happy. Her words carried deep, moving emotion, reflecting the violent tearing inside the desperate, impoverished woman now experiencing the warmth of protection, her heart shifting from suspicion to burning attachment. The psychological shock was profound, leaving her numb and curious all at once. Vin knelt at a careful distance, his voice rough with inner torment. "You brought this light to them. To all of us." His remorse gnawed relentlessly as he saw the lingering frailty in Sarah's thin frame. The disparity, his immense resources versus her history of enduring nights without shelter or hope, only heightened the storm within. He felt a passionate responsibility to guard this newfound gentleness against the dangers ahead, especially as reports whispered of rising tensions in distant waters like the Strait of Hormuz, where conflicts threatened safe passage. As the afternoon light softened, another small breakthrough unfolded. Lily offered Sarah her teddy bear for a moment, and Mia added a crayon drawing of our new helper. The girl's innocent kindness chipped away at the hardness, creating another pocket of quiet, emotional stillness amid the yacht's gentle motion. Sarah felt the overwhelming trust surge stronger, a fierce attachment that left her heart full yet aching with the memory of her past powerlessness. Vin stood watch as the sun dipped lower, the inner conflict raging with greater violence. His love for Sarah's well-being and the children's healing burned like a beacon, compelling him to confront the remorse that had haunted him for years. The yacht's luxury, its secure decks, warm comforts, and capable crew stood in stark, increasing contrast to the pitiful misery Sarah had known. Unreasonable events from her life replayed in his mind, evoking deep sympathy and a determination to rewrite such unfairness. In the condensed stillness that followed, with the girls resting nearby and the water splashing softly in the buckets, a fragile bridge of hope formed. Sarah's persistence through hardship had sparked the first genuine breakthroughs, laughter, and drawings that hinted at healing. Yet the inner turmoils of both adults grew ever more intense. His violent remorse and protective passion, hers, the confusing, numbing shift from desperate poverty to sudden burning trust under the shelter of unexpected power and compassion. The voyage pressed onward, carrying them toward greater uncertainties, but for this afternoon, joy had found a small, precious foothold on the horizon. The superyacht the Horizon pressed onward through the October 2025 waters, its powerful engines carrying the vessel toward increasingly tense international routes. News from the bridge spoke in hushed tones of rising conflicts far ahead in the Strait of Hormuz, where threats of closure, missile activity, and disrupted shipping created an undercurrent of unease, even on this luxurious American vessel. Yet on the enclosed deck and in the nursery suite, a gentler rhythm had begun to take hold after the previous day's breakthroughs. Laughter from the water play still echoed faintly in memory, but Vincent Van Harlen found himself unable to look away from the quiet scenes unfolding before him. He stood in the shadowed observation lounge adjacent to the main deck, the one-way glass allowing him to watch without intruding. The space itself displayed his immense wealth with understated intensity leather seating crafted for comfort during long voyages, advanced monitoring screens showing calm seas, and a private bar stocked with the finest selections. Crystal decanters caught the soft lighting, while outside the tinted windows the vast water stretched endlessly. This floating empire, worth more than most could imagine, felt strangely hollow as he observed Sarah Thompson interacting with Lily and Mia. Sarah moved with the same patient grace that had sparked the first giggles. She sat cross-legged on the padded deck, her thin, malnourished frame still wrapped in one of the yacht's soft blankets. The absolute extremity of her former poverty remained etched in every subtle motion, the way her hollow cheeks flushed with effort, the faint tremble in her hands from weeks of sleep deprivation and hunger, the quiet winces when dizziness reminded her of cold, wind-filled nights spent huddled in Chicago alleys. She had endured humiliating days of begging with a soft, timid voice for scraps at soup kitchens, only to face rejection or pity that stripped away dignity. Unreasonable injustices had compounded her misery: the abrupt closure of the daycare where she worked as a teacher's aide, the eviction that left her caring for her brother with nowhere to turn the theft of her last belongings on a freezing night when the wind cut like knives, Those memories made her current surroundings feel almost cruel. In their contrast, the warm deck, the safe play area, the crew discreetly providing fresh fruit and soft toys. At times, she still felt desperate and powerless, a deeply pitiful shadow of the resilient young woman she once hoped to be. Lily and Mia played nearby with crayons and the well-worn copy of Goodnight Moon, their small voices occasionally rising in innocent questions. Sarah's voice remained soft and polite when she answered them appropriate to her age, and the overwhelming presence of the powerful man whose protection had upended her world. "Yes, Lily, the moon watches over everyone even when we feel small," she said gently, her tone carrying quiet encouragement. Inside, however, her emotions churned with violent intensity. Confusion and fear still flickered horror at how easily her life had nearly ended on the streets, anxiety that this safety might vanish as suddenly as it appeared. Dizziness sometimes swept over her, causing numbness in her limbs and a deep disorientation that made the luxurious deck blur. Yet heightened curiosity and an overwhelming trust burned passionately within her, an intense attachment forming from the very first moments of rescue. The mindset of someone who had been desperately poor, suddenly loved and protected by a wealthy, powerful man created extreme psychological shock. Gratitude mixed with guarded wonder left her heart racing numb one moment and filled with burning attachment the next. Vin watched every detail through the glass, his tall, fair-skinned frame, rigid with the growing storm inside. His sharp blue eyes followed Sarah's gentle movements, the way she patiently helped Mia add colors to a drawing of our safe boat. The girl's innocent kindness, Lily offering Sarah the teddy bear keepsake, Mia slowly sharing a story from the book, chipped further at the walls around his heart. This observation ignited an internal shift more profound than any he had experienced. His wealth surrounded them all with increasing intensity. The superyacht's state-of-the-art stabilization that kept the deck steady, despite distant waves, the security protocols monitoring every horizon, the resources that could provide anything the children or Sarah needed. Yet this luxury only amplified his gnawing remorse and violent inner conflict. Remorse tore at him with ferocious intensity. He thought of the single mother from his past, the brief relationship he had ended to shield her from his dangerous world, and the child, possibly his own biological daughter, whose existence now haunted him through scattered documents his investigators had uncovered. Guilt consumed him, a deep, moving torment that made his chest ache as if physically wounded. How many vulnerable lives had his choices indirectly harmed? Seeing Sarah so frail and sleep-deprived, yet extending compassion without resentment, stirred an overwhelming surge of protective love. Not romantic, but a fierce, passionate, almost fatherly attachment that burned from the earliest moments of pulling her from that Chicago alley. This love for her well-being and the children's healing became a compelling focal point, driving every quiet decision he made. The violent emotional upheaval escalated. The ruthless, powerful man who had built success through calculated control clashed against the man yearning to offer genuine protection and emotional healing. How could he shield them when his world invited shadows? The drama escalated unexpectedly during the afternoon. A bold confrontation intruded from the bridge. Rival factions monitoring maritime communications amid the tense global climate sent another sharp encrypted challenge. Voices rose in controlled but heated exchanges over secure lines. Accusations of encroaching on territories, demands that Vin reconsider certain routes or face complications as the vessel approached more volatile waters. The rivals' words carried bold threats of interference, referencing the rising risks in distant straits where shipping faced disruption. Vin responded with calm authority from his position, his presence alone forcing measured retreats after tense verbal pushes. No physical violence occurred, but the suspense thickened the air, leaving the crew alert and Vin's jaw tight with fresh frustration. The unfairness struck Vin like another blow. Even in this moment of quiet observation and fragile joy, dangers from his life threatened to intrude. He thought of Sarah's past absurdly unjust events, the sudden job loss, the eviction while she cared for family, the theft that left her utterly powerless on freezing nights. Each memory evoked deep sympathy, and tears he held back, intensifying his remorse. His inner world tore violently, power, demanding he maintain control, compassion, demanding he prioritize their safety above all. Sarah sensed his presence nearby, and looked up briefly, her hazel eyes meeting the glass, as if feeling his gaze. Her voice, when she spoke later to the girls, carried deeper emotion. "Sometimes strong people watch over us even when we cannot see them," she whispered softly, her tone timid yet filled with growing trust. The psychological shock within her deepened, the once desperate, impoverished woman now protected and valued, her heart shifting from lingering suspicion to passionate, burning attachment. It left her dizzy with confusion and numb, with the overwhelming contrast between her humiliating poverty and this sudden sanctuary. In a quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed the confrontation's resolution, Vin stepped onto the deck at a careful distance. He watched as Lily crawled closer to Sarah, offering a crayon drawing of a tall figure protecting smaller ones. Mia's guarded expression had softened, further revealing glimpses of the vulnerable child beneath. The scene moved Vin profoundly. His love for Sarah's resilience and the healing she facilitated created a fierce inner highlight, a violent conflict between remorse for past failures and determination to rewrite the future. "You are changing something here," he said quietly when Sarah glanced his way again, his voice rough with the depth of his turmoil. Remorse gnawed relentlessly as he noted the lingering frailty in her thin frame, the way exhaustion still shadowed her eyes. The disparity between his resources and her history of enduring cold winds and hunger only heightened the storm. He felt passionately responsible to guard this fragile progress against the uncertainties ahead, especially with radio updates hinting at growing tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, where shipping faced serious risks. Sarah responded with her soft, polite voice. "I am only trying to give what I wished someone had given me, Mr. Harlan, sir." Her words carried genuine moving emotion, reflecting the intense tearing inside gratitude, burning alongside the memory of powerlessness, creating a numbing yet hopeful surge. As the sun began to lower, casting golden light across the deck, another small moment of connection unfolded. Sarah hummed, "You Are My Sunshine," while the girls rested against her, their small bodies relaxing in trust. Vin remained in observation, the inner shift solidifying. His remorse grew more consuming, his protective attachment more fierce, the violent conflict between his powerful world and the call to compassion tearing at him with greater force. The yacht continued its course, the observation of these gentle breakthroughs marking a profound turning point in Vin's heart. Unreasonable memories of Sarah's misery evoked sympathy and quiet tears, while the luxury of the horizon stood in stark contrast. In the condensed emotional stillness of the late afternoon, with laughter's echo lingering and the girls' drawings scattered like hope, Vin felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier. His love for the rescued woman's well-being and the children's healing burned as a guiding light amid the inner storm, propelling him toward choices that would test every layer of his tormented soul. The voyage pressed forward into uncertain waters, but for Vin the internal shift had begun in earnest, a movement from distant power toward deeper, more human connection forged in the quiet observation of kindness amid hardship. The superyacht the Horizon sliced through increasingly restless waters in late October 2025, its sleek hull steady despite the distant warnings crackling over the bridge radio. Reports spoke of escalating tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, where Iranian threats, potential minefields, and disrupted shipping lanes created a shadow of uncertainty even thousands of miles away. On board, the atmosphere had grown heavier, the luxury of polished decks and warm interiors contrasting sharply with the emotional fragility that lingered after the previous day's gentle breakthroughs. Sarah Thompson sat in the nursery suite, her thin, malnourished body wrapped in one of the yacht's soft quilts. The absolute extremity of her former poverty still haunted every movement, the hollowed cheeks from weeks of hunger, the faint tremors in her hands from endless sleep-deprived nights, the way cold winds had once cut through her patched coat until her entire frame ached with numbness. She had known deeply pitiful humiliation, begging with a soft, timid voice at soup kitchens only to be turned away, sleeping in doorways where the wind howled mercilessly, losing her few belongings to theft while she searched desperately for work. Unreasonable injustices had torn at her relentlessly, the sudden shutdown of the daycare that left her without income, the eviction notice delivered while she cared for her younger brother, the absurd cruelty of strangers stealing her last possessions on a freezing night. Those memories made the yacht's wealth feel almost mocking in its intensity: heated rooms, fresh meals prepared by the crew, advanced medical supplies in the onboard infirmary, and security that kept external threats at bay for now. Lily and Mia played quietly nearby with crayons, and the well-worn copy of Goodnight Moon, their small bodies still carrying traces of their own emotional withdrawal. Sarah's voice remained soft and polite as she guided them. "Draw whatever makes you feel safe," she whispered gently, her tone appropriate to her young age, and the powerful presence that now watched over them all. Inside, however, violent emotional waves crashed through her. Confusion and lingering fear, mixed with heightened curiosity, leaving her dizzy at moments. A deep disorientation, causing the room to tilt and numbness to settle in her limbs. The mindset of someone who had been desperately poor, suddenly protected and valued by a wealthy, powerful man, created extreme psychological shock. Her trust in Vincent Harlan had grown into an overwhelming, burning attachment, passionate and intense from the first night in the alley, yet it warred with guarded anxiety, the humiliating memory of powerlessness still raw. From the observation lounge, Vin watched the scene with growing intensity. His tall, fair-skinned frame stood rigid, sharp blue eyes fixed on Sarah's patient care. His wealth surrounded them with ever greater display, the superyacht's sophisticated stabilization systems, the crew's discreet efficiency, the resources that could summon help from anywhere. Yet this luxury only deepened his gnawing remorse. Thoughts of the single mother from his past and the child who might be his biological daughter tore at him relentlessly. Guilt consumed him, a violent inner conflict raging between the ruthless man who had built an empire through control and the man now overwhelmed by protective, almost fatherly love for the rescued woman and the vulnerable children. This love for Sarah's well-being burned as a compelling focal point, fierce, passionate, and rooted in compassion rather than romance. It drove him to shield her from further pain, yet the remorse for his past choices made every quiet moment feel like a painful reckoning. The crisis erupted without warning in the early evening. A sudden drone alert sounded across the bridge, not an immediate attack but a close-range sighting of unidentified aircraft amid the heightened global tensions. The yacht's advanced systems detected potential risk, forcing evasive maneuvers that sent a sharp jolt through the vessel. In the chaos, a heavy equipment panel in the nursery suite shifted unexpectedly, striking Vin as he rushed to check on the children. He staggered, a deep gash opening on his arm and shoulder from the impact, blood staining his tailored shirt. Pain flared, but it was nothing compared to the terror that gripped him when he saw Lily and Mia cry out in fear. Sarah moved instantly, her own frailty forgotten in the moment. "Mr. Harlan, sir." Her voice trembled with horror and anxiety, soft yet urgent. She guided him toward the onboard infirmary, with the girls clinging to her sides. Dizziness swept over her as she helped him, the numbing pain of her malnourished body threatening her balance, but she refused to falter. The disparity tore at her heart, this powerful man suddenly vulnerable, while she once utterly powerless on the streets now offered what little strength she had. The psychological shock was profound and violent. Someone who had endured cold, humiliating nights was now tending to her rescuer, her burning attachment surging into overwhelming trust and fierce concern. In the infirmary, the crew provided advanced medical supplies, sterile dressings, pain relief, and monitoring equipment that spoke of Vin's immense resources. Sarah pressed clean cloths to the wound with trembling hands, her timid voice whispering encouragement. "You will be all right, sir. We are all here." Lily and Mia hovered close, their small hands, offering the teddy bear and a crayon, drawing as innocent comfort. The shared vulnerability created a quiet, condensed emotional stillness amid the beeping monitors and the yacht's continued steady motion. Vin sat on the examination table, his face pale but composed. The physical pain was secondary to the storm raging inside him. Remorse tore violently at his heart as he looked at Sarah, so thin and sleep-deprived, yet kneeling beside him with selfless care despite her own history of suffering. Guilt over his past abandonment of the single mother and the possible biological child intensified into a consuming fire. How could he, with all his power and wealth, have allowed such vulnerability to touch those he now felt responsible for? The inner conflict grew more ferocious. The Mafia boss who navigated dangerous rivalries clashed against the man whose protective love for Sarah and the children demanded he become better to heal the emotional wounds his life had caused. This upheaval toward her was passionate and intense, a deep, moving compassion that made his chest tighten with every breath. Drama escalated further when another tense confrontation intruded. The bridge reported an encrypted message from rival factions, bold and unexpected, referencing the drone sighting and suggesting opportunities if Vin reconsidered his routes amid the Hormuz tensions. Sharp words were exchanged over secure channels, accusations, and counter-demands, flying without physical escalation, but the suspense hung heavy. Vin responded with commanding calm from the infirmary, his authority forcing the rivals to back down after heated verbal exchanges. The unfairness burned deeply. Even in injury, his world invited shadows that could endanger Sarah and the girls. Memories of Sarah's absurdly unjust past, the job loss, eviction, and theft that left her broken on the streets, flooded him, evoking profound sympathy and quiet tears he fought to contain. Sarah felt the emotional tearing intensify within her own heart. As she bandaged the wound, horror and anxiety mixed with deep disorientation. The powerful man who had rescued her from absolute misery now relied on her care. The contrast left her numb and dizzy. A violent psychological shock reflecting the mindset of someone once powerless, now suddenly integral to his well-being. Her attachment burned hotter, a passionate trust that made her whisper, "You saved me when no one else would. Let me help you now, sir." Her soft, polite voice carried genuine, moving emotion, tears glistening as the unfairness of both their burdens weighed upon her. In the quiet, condensed stillness that followed the rivals' retreat, Lily crawled closer and placed her small hand on Vin's uninjured arm. "You are safe, like you keep us safe." the little girl whispered, echoing Sarah's earlier words. Mia offered her own hesitant comfort, her distrust softening further in the shared vulnerability. The moment was deeply moving, the children's innocent kindness healing something in Vin that no wealth could touch. Vin looked at Sarah across the infirmary, his sharp blue eyes filled with raw emotion. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice rough with the depth of his torment. Remorse gnawed more fiercely than ever, the violent inner conflict between his powerful empire and the call to genuine protection reaching a new peak. His love for her resilience and the healing she brought created a compelling focal point, driving him to confront the guilt that had haunted him for years. Sarah met his gaze, her hazel eyes reflecting the overwhelming attachment that had grown from suspicion to burning trust. Dizziness and numbness still lingered from the day's stress, but so did a profound sense of purpose. The yacht continued its course, the crisis forging a deeper bond through shared vulnerability. Unreasonable memories of past injustices evoked sympathy and quiet tears, while the luxury of the horizon, its medical capabilities, secure systems, and resources stood in stark contrast to the misery Sarah had once known. As night settled over the waters, the inner turmoils of both Sarah and Vin grew ever more intense, his remorse and protective passion tearing violently hers, the confusing numbing shift from desperate poverty to fierce compassionate connection. In this moment of crisis, a fragile bridge of healing had begun to form, one that would be tested further as the vessel sailed toward more perilous horizons. The superyacht, the Horizon, glided through the darkening waters of late October 2025, its powerful systems maintaining steady progress despite distant radio reports of mounting tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. Warnings of potential shipping, disruptions, drone activity, and heightened international risks filtered through the bridge, casting a subtle shadow over the vessel's luxurious interior. Yet in the nursery suite and on the protected deck, a gentler process had begun to unfold, one of slow, tentative healing born from the shared vulnerability of the previous crisis. Sarah Thompson sat beside the comfortable bunks, her thin, malnourished frame still showing the deep marks of absolute poverty. Her hollow cheeks and shadowed hazel eyes spoke silently of weeks spent enduring cold, wind-filled nights on Chicago streets, where sleep came only in exhausted snatches, interrupted by hunger pains and fear. She had known the most pitiful humiliation, begging with a soft, timid voice for simple meals at soup kitchens only to face rejection or indifferent glances that stripped away every shred of dignity. Unreasonable injustices had piled upon her without mercy. The abrupt closure of the inner-city daycare that left her without any income. The eviction that came while she struggled to care for her younger brother. The theft of her last few belongings on a freezing night when the wind cut through. Her thin coat like invisible knives. Those memories made the yacht's wealth feel almost overwhelming in its contrast. The soft family quilts, the well-stocked infirmary that had treated Vin's injury, the crew's quiet efficiency providing warm meals and safe spaces for the children. At times, Sarah still felt desperate and powerless, a deeply pitiful shadow haunted by her past powerlessness. At other moments, confusion and lingering fear washed over her, bringing dizziness that caused the elegant room to spin and a numbing pain to settle in her limbs. Lily and Mia rested nearby, their small bodies beginning to relax in the security of routine. Sarah's voice remained soft and polite as she guided them through simple activities. "Let us try together," she whispered gently, her tone appropriate to her young age, and the powerful man whose protection now enveloped them. She helped the girls practice wrapping a small bandage on a stuffed animal, echoing the care she had given Vin during the crisis. Inside, however, her emotions churned with violent intensity. The overwhelming trust and burning attachment she felt toward Vincent Harlan had grown passionate and fierce from the very first night of rescue. Yet it warred with guarded anxiety and the humiliating memory of her former misery, creating extreme psychological shock. The mindset of someone once desperately poor, now suddenly protected and needed by a wealthy, powerful man left her heart, numb one moment, and racing with gratitude the next. Vin observed from the doorway, his tall, fair-skinned frame leaning against the frame as he recovered from the gash on his arm. The injury had been treated with the yacht's advanced medical resources, yet the deeper wounds inside him continued to bleed. His wealth was displayed with increasing intensity all around them. The superyacht's sophisticated stabilization that kept every surface steady. The private medical supplies that rivaled small hospitals. The security protocols that monitored every horizon for threats. This floating empire built through years of calculated success now felt like both a sanctuary and a prison for his tormented soul. The healing process began in small mutual steps. Vin lowered himself carefully into a chair near the girls, his sharp blue eyes watching Sarah with raw intensity. "Show me," he said quietly, his voice rough with the depth of his inner storm. Sarah hesitated only a moment before demonstrating how to hold the stuffed animal gently while wrapping the practice bandage. Her movements were patient and kind, the same patience that had once sustained her through nights of cold and hunger. Vin tried his large hands awkward at first. The simple act stirred a profound internal shift. Remorse gnawed at him with ferocious new intensity as he thought of the single mother from his past and the child who might be his own blood. A child he had unknowingly failed by walking away to protect her from his dangerous world. Guilt tore violently at his heart, a consuming fire that mixed with the fierce protective love he felt for Sarah and the children. This love was not romantic, but a deep, passionate compassion and fatherly responsibility that had burned from the moment he first saw her in that Chicago alley. It created a compelling focal point for every emotion, driving him to learn to heal, to become the shield he wished he had been years earlier. The violent inner conflict escalated. The powerful Mafia boss who commanded respect through control clashed against the man whose remorse demanded he embrace vulnerability and genuine connection. How could he offer healing when his own life carried such shadows? As the afternoon unfolded, more small lessons emerged. Sarah taught Vin how to read Goodnight Moon with steady rhythm, how to wrap the soft quilt around the girls during their rest time, and how to listen quietly when Lily or Mia shared simple fears. Her voice stayed soft and timid when addressing him. "Small steps matter, Mr. Harlan, sir. They feel your steadiness, even if the words are not perfect." Each interaction deepened the mutual learning. Vin's presence, once distant and commanding, grew more present, his movements careful around the children. Yet drama intruded once again to test the fragile progress. A bold, unexpected confrontation arose via secure communication from rival factions monitoring maritime routes. The rivals referenced the earlier drone sighting and pressed aggressively for concessions on certain business territories, their messages carrying veiled threats of interference. As the yacht approached more volatile international waters, sharp, tense exchanges followed, controlled but heated words flying across encrypted channels without any physical escalation. Vin responded with firm authority from the nursery suite, his calm commands forcing the rivals to retreat after several intense verbal pushes. The suspense left the air thick, reminding everyone of the dangers that still circled. The unfairness struck Sarah like a fresh wound. As she watched Vin handle the confrontation, memories of her own absurdly unjust past flooded back. The sudden job loss that left her penniless, the eviction that came without compassion, the theft that stripped her of the last pieces of security on a freezing night. Tears welled in her eyes as she felt the violent tearing inside, horror at how danger still followed. Even here, anxiety that her presence might bring more trouble, and a deep, numbing disorientation at the contrast between her former powerlessness and this moment of being protected. The psychological shock was profound. Someone once humiliated by poverty now sat in luxury, witnessing a powerful man shield them all, while her burning attachment to his care grew ever stronger and more passionate. In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed the rivals' retreat, Vin turned to Sarah. His voice was low and rough with torment. "You are teaching me what my power never could." Remorse consumed him more deeply than before, the gnawing guilt over past failures mixing with fierce determination to protect this rescued woman and the children. His love for her resilience created a violent inner highlight, tearing between the ruthless success that had defined him and the compassionate healing he now craved. Sarah looked at him, her hazel eyes reflecting overwhelming trust. "I only give what I wished someone had given me when I had nothing, sir," she replied softly, her polite voice trembling with genuine emotion. Dizziness swept over her briefly, a wave of numbness reminding her of cold alley nights. Yet the attachment burned hotter, an intense, passionate reliance born from suspicion now transformed into profound connection. The healing continued through the evening in small, meaningful ways. Vin practiced humming "You Are My Sunshine" alongside Sarah, his deep voice off-key but steady, bringing shy smiles to Lily and Mia's faces. The girl's innocent kindness, Lily offering him a crayon drawing of Daddy, learning Mia slowly sharing her own small fears, chipped further at his hardness. Each moment deepened the mutual learning and the fatherly bond forming between Vin and the children, with Sarah as the gentle guide. Another absurdly unfair ripple came when a minor mechanical alert delayed their planned route adjustment, forcing extra hours of careful navigation amid the growing global uncertainties. The event felt cruel in its timing, amplifying Sarah's inner turmoil as she recalled every unjust blow life had dealt her. Yet in the condensed stillness that followed, with the girls resting peacefully and the hum of the engines providing a soothing backdrop, a deeper emotional bridge formed. Vin sat in quiet reflection, the inner tearing growing more intense with every passing hour. His remorse was now a living fire, his protective love for Sarah a fierce guiding force that demanded he confront the shadows of his past. The disparity between his vast wealth, the yacht's every comfort and security measure, and Sarah's history of enduring humiliating poverty only heightened the storm within him. Sarah, watching the children sleep, felt her own heart torn between lingering fear and the burning attachment that had become her anchor. The psychological shock of sudden protection after desperate misery left her numb, yet hopeful, her trust in Vin deepening into something profound and moving. As night deepened over the waters, the healing and mutual learning continued to weave its quiet magic aboard the horizon. The inner turmoils of both adults grew ever more violent and consuming, Vin's remorse and passionate responsibility clashing with his powerful world. Sarah's overwhelming trust rising from the ashes of her former powerlessness. In these shared moments of vulnerability and gentle guidance, the seeds of deeper emotional restoration had been planted, ready to face whatever challenges the voyage and life would bring next. The superyacht the Horizon moved steadily through the October 2025 waters, its elegant decks catching the late afternoon light as the vessel navigated routes that carried it closer to more uncertain international passage. Distant radio updates from the bridge spoke of growing concerns in the Strait of Hormuz, where threats of closures, heightened alerts, and potential disruptions weighed on the crew's quiet conversations. On board, however, a warmer rhythm had taken root in the nursery suite, and on the protected deck areas forged through the mutual learning and shared vulnerability of recent days. Sarah Thompson sat on the padded deck with Lily and Mia, her thin, malnourished frame still wrapped in one of the soft quilts that had become a small comfort. The absolute extremity of her former poverty remained visible in every subtle sign: the hollow cheeks from prolonged hunger, the faint shadows under her hazel eyes from weeks of sleep deprivation, the occasional tremor in her hands that spoke of cold, wind-filled nights spent shivering in Chicago, alleys or doorways. She had endured deeply pitiful humiliation, begging with a soft, timid voice for basic food at soup kitchens, only to face indifference or rejection, losing her few possessions to theft on a freezing night when the wind felt like punishment. Unreasonable injustices had compounded her misery without mercy. The sudden closure of the daycare where she worked as a teacher's aide, the eviction that arrived while she cared for her younger brother, the absurd cruelty of strangers, taking her last belongings while she was out searching for any kind of work. These memories made the yacht's wealth feel both like a miracle and a painful reminder of disparity. The luxurious furnishings, the crew's attentive service providing warm drinks and safe play items, the advanced security systems that kept external dangers at bay for now. Lily and Mia played with crayons and the well-worn copy of Goodnight Moon, their small voices rising occasionally in innocent questions or shy laughter. Sarah's voice stayed soft and polite as she joined them. "Tell me what makes you feel brave today," she whispered gently, her tone reflecting her young age and the powerful presence that now sheltered them all. Inside, her emotions surged with increasing violence. The burning attachment she felt toward Vincent Harlan had grown into a passionate, intense trust from the very first moments of rescue in that dark alley. Yet confusion and lingering fear still flickered, bringing waves of dizziness that caused the deck to tilt and a numbing disorientation to settle over her. The psychological shock remained profound. Someone once desperately poor and powerless was now protected and valued by a wealthy, powerful man, creating a heart that raced between overwhelming gratitude and guarded anxiety. Vin stood at a short distance on the deck, his tall, fair-skinned frame relaxed yet watchful. The gash on his arm was healing well thanks to the yacht's medical resources, but the deeper wounds in his heart continued to throb. His wealth surrounded them with ever greater intensity. The superyacht's sophisticated navigation and stabilization systems, the comfortable lounging areas, the discreet crew ensuring every need was met without question. This floating world of luxury and security stood in stark contrast to the misery Sarah had known, amplifying the storm inside him. The deepening bond unfolded in quiet, meaningful moments. Vin joined the small circle, lowering himself carefully to sit near the girls. He practiced the simple games Sarah had shown him, helping Lily choose colors for her drawings, listening patiently as Mia shared a short story from the book. His deep voice, once commanding in boardrooms and tense confrontations, now carried a gentler steadiness when he read aloud. Sarah guided him with soft encouragement. "You are doing well, Mr. Harlan, sir. They feel your presence more than perfection." Each interaction strengthened the connection. Lily leaned against Vin's uninjured side during one reading, her small hand resting trustingly on his arm. Mia, whose initial distrust had slowly softened, offered him a crayon to add to a group drawing of our family on the boat. These innocent gestures created pockets of condensed emotional stillness amid the yacht's gentle motion moments, where laughter rose softly, and the girls' eyes brightened with growing security. Yet tension built steadily beneath the surface. A bold, unexpected confrontation erupted through secure communications in the mid-afternoon. Rival factions tracking the vessel's progress amid the global uncertainties sent sharp messages challenging Vin's decisions on certain routes and territories. The exchange grew heated with veiled threats of interference as the yacht drew nearer to areas affected by the rising tensions in distant waters. Vin responded with calm but firm authority, his words measured and commanding, forcing the rivals to withdraw after several intense verbal exchanges. No physical action occurred, but the suspense left a heavy atmosphere, reminding everyone of the shadows that still followed his powerful world. Sarah witnessed the exchange from the deck, her heart tearing violently with new intensity. Horror and anxiety flooded her as she recalled her own absurdly unjust past, the job loss that left her penniless, the eviction that stripped her of shelter while she cared for family, the theft that left her broken and humiliated on freezing nights. The unfairness felt numbing and confusing. Even in this sanctuary, danger circled. Dizziness swept over her, a wave of deep disorientation that made her steady herself against the railing. The psychological shock was extreme. The once powerless woman now watched a powerful man shield them, her passionate attachment burning hotter while fear for what his world might bring clashed inside her. Vin felt the inner turmoil escalate to new heights. Remorse gnawed at him with ferocious force as he saw the worry in Sarah's eyes. Guilt over his past, the single mother he had walked away from, and the child who might be his biological daughter, mixed with fierce, protective love for the rescued woman and the vulnerable girls. This love had become a compelling focal point, passionate and intense, rooted in deep compassion and fatherly responsibility rather than romance. It drove him to shield them at all costs. Yet the violent conflict raged inside the ruthless success that had built his empire, versus the man whose remorse demanded he prioritize healing and safety above power. The disparity between his vast resources and Sarah's history of enduring cold, humiliating poverty only deepened the tearing in his heart. In the quiet, condensed stillness that followed the rivals' retreat, Vin turned to Sarah. His voice was low and rough with emotion. "You have brought light where I only knew shadows," Sarah replied softly, her polite tone carrying moving depth. "I am grateful for the safety you have given when I had none, sir." Her words reflected the overwhelming trust that had replaced her initial suspicion, a burning attachment that left her heart full yet aching with the memory of powerlessness. Another absurdly unfair ripple came when a sudden weather shift forced a brief course adjustment, delaying their smoother passage and adding extra hours of cautious navigation. The event felt cruel in its timing, stirring fresh memories of Sarah's past injustices and amplifying her inner torment. She felt desperate and guarded for a moment, dizziness returning as the contrast between her former misery and current protection overwhelmed her. Yet the bond continued to deepen through small, tender moments. Vin helped the girls with a simple drawing activity, his large hands guided by Sarah's gentle instructions. Lily whispered a secret to him about her favorite color, and Mia allowed him to tuck the quilt around her during rest time. These interactions created profound emotional highlights, the children's innocent kindness healing something in Vin that no amount of wealth could achieve. As evening approached, the tension on board remained palpable. Radio updates spoke of the ongoing uncertainties ahead, mirroring the building suspense in Vin's heart. His remorse grew more, consuming his protective love for Sarah and the children more fierce, the violent inner conflict tearing at him with greater force than ever before. Sarah sat in the quiet after the girls rested, her own heart torn between lingering anxiety and the passionate attachment that had become her anchor. The psychological shock of sudden safety after desperate poverty left her numb, yet hopeful, her trust in Vin deepening into something truly profound. In the condensed emotional stillness of the fading light, with the gentle lap of water against the hull and the soft breathing of the sleeping children nearby, the deepening bond between them all continued to grow. The playfulness of earlier days had evolved into something stronger, a shared resilience that prepared them for whatever tensions lay ahead. Vin's internal world raged with remorse and responsibility, Sarah's with gratitude and guarded hope. Yet together they had created a fragile but real sense of family amid the vast sea and the uncertainties of the voyage. The bond had deepened, but the tension continued to build, drawing them closer even as the world outside grew more uncertain. The superyacht the Horizon pressed forward in the final days of October 2025, its powerful engines humming steadily as it navigated waters that grew more perilous with each passing report from the bridge. News of escalating conflicts in the Strait of Hormuz filtered through Iranian forces had effectively closed sections of the vital passage, amid ongoing tensions with threats of drone strikes, missile activity, and potential mines disrupting the global shipping routes. The yacht remained far from the immediate danger zone for now, yet the atmosphere aboard carried an undercurrent of unease. the luxury of its decks and suites a fragile bubble against the uncertainties beyond. Sarah Thompson moved through the nursery suite with quiet care, her thin, malnourished frame still bearing the silent scars of absolute poverty. Her hollow cheeks and shadowed hazel eyes spoke of weeks enduring cold, wind-filled nights on Chicago streets, where hunger gnawed constantly, and sleep came only in fitful, exhausted bursts interrupted by fear and pain. She had known the deepest, most humiliating misery, begging with a soft, timid voice at soup kitchens, only to face rejection or pitying glances that stripped away dignity, losing her few belongings to theft on a freezing night when the wind felt like judgment itself. Unreasonable injustices had battered her without mercy. The sudden closure of the daycare that left her without income. The eviction that arrived while she struggled to care for her younger brother. The absurd cruelty of strangers taking her last possessions while she searched desperately for work. These memories made the yacht's wealth feel almost overwhelming. In its intensity, the soft quilts, the well-stocked spaces, the crew's discreet efficiency providing safety and comfort that contrasted sharply with her former day powerlessness. Lily and Mia rested nearby, their small bodies growing more trusting with each passing day. Sarah's voice remained soft and polite as she checked on them. "Rest easy, little ones. You are safe here," she whispered gently, her tone reflecting her young age and the powerful man whose protection now surrounded them. Inside, however, her emotions churned with violent new intensity. The passionate, burning attachment she felt toward Vincent Harlan had deepened into overwhelming trust from the very first moments of rescue. Yet confusion and lingering fear still flickered, bringing waves of dizziness that caused the room to tilt and a numbing disorientation to settle in her limbs. The psychological shock remained extreme. Someone once desperately poor and humiliated was now protected, and needed creating a heart that raced between profound gratitude and guarded anxiety. Vin stood on the upper deck, his tall, fair-skinned frame silhouetted against the fading light. The injury from the earlier crisis had healed enough for normal movement, yet the deeper wounds in his soul continued to bleed. His wealth displayed itself with increasing intensity all around the superyacht's advanced security and navigation systems, the comfortable lounges, the resources that could summon aid from afar. This floating empire felt both sanctuary and burden as the inner storm raged within him. The shocking twist unfolded in the deep of night. A sudden alert rang through the vessel. Iranian speedboat activity had been detected in nearby waters amid the broader Hormuz tensions, with reports of aggressive maneuvers and potential boarding risks for vessels perceived as linked to certain interests. The situation escalated when Vin's own lieutenant, a trusted associate who had served for years, revealed his betrayal. In a tense, encrypted confrontation relayed to the bridge, the lieutenant attempted to signal the approaching boats, offering information on the yacht's position and assets in exchange for control of Vin's empire once the chaos subsided. The rival factions had been in secret contact, exploiting the global uncertainties to strike from within. Vin confronted the betrayal in the command area, his voice calm but edged with steel, as sharp words were exchanged. The lieutenant's bold accusations flew claims that Vin had grown soft, that his recent weakness with the rescued woman and children endangered everyone. No physical violence erupted, but the verbal clash was heated and unexpected suspense thickening the air, as Vin's authority forced the lieutenant to back down temporarily while security contained the immediate threat. The rivals' speedboats circled at a distance, their presence a bold reminder of the dangers that had followed them. Sarah, alerted by the commotion, rushed to the deck with the girls clinging to her. Horror and anxiety gripped her as she saw the tension in Vin's face. "Mr. Harlan, sir. What is happening?" Her soft, timid voice trembled with fear and heightened curiosity, polite even in the crisis. Dizziness swept over her, a wave of numbness and pain from her malnourished body, threatening her balance, as she steadied the children. The unfairness tore at her violently. After all the healing moments after the deepening bond, danger still struck from within the very circle meant to protect them. Memories of her own absurdly unjust past flooded back: the job loss, the eviction, the theft that left her utterly broken on freezing nights. The psychological shock was profound and numbing. The once powerless woman now stood amid luxury, witnessing betrayal that could endanger the man who had rescued her from absolute misery. In the chaos, with speedboats drawing closer and the lieutenant's betrayal hanging heavy, Lily, the main child, acted with innocent bravery that no one could have anticipated. The little girl, clutching her teddy bear keepsake, slipped away briefly in the confusion and reached a secondary communication panel she had seen the crew use during play. With childlike determination, she used a simple crayon drawing she had made earlier, one showing the strong man protecting us with rough coordinates, scribbled in her handwriting, and placed her teddy bear beside it as a signal. She activated the emergency beacon in a way only a child's curious exploration had taught her, sending a clear alert to a distant friendly vessel monitoring the area. The act was a life-threatening sacrifice. As the speedboats pressed closer, one of the rival craft fired warning flares that created a sudden dangerous flash near the yacht. Vin, spotting Lily near the exposed panel, lunged to shield her, taking the brunt of flying debris that reopened his wound and caused fresh injury. Pain flared, but it was nothing compared to the terror of seeing the child he now viewed with profound fatherly love in harm's way. Sarah rushed forward, her voice breaking with horror. "Lily, Mr. Harlan," she helped pull them to safety, her thin frame trembling as dizziness and numbness threatened to overwhelm her. The scene created a quiet, condensed emotional stillness amid the alerts. Lily's small sacrifice, her innocent courage in using the drawing and teddy bear to signal help, had bought precious time. A responding vessel's lights appeared on the horizon, forcing the speedboats to retreat after tense radio exchanges. Vin, bleeding yet holding Lily close, felt his heart tear with unprecedented violence. Remorse consumed him like never before, guilt over his past failures with the single mother and the biological child he suspected was his own, now amplified by how close danger had come to the innocent souls he had sworn to protect. His protective love for Sarah and the children burned as a fierce, passionate force, a compelling focal point that made every breath ache. The violent inner conflict raged: the powerful Mafia boss whose world invited betrayal, versus the man whose remorse and compassion demanded he choose healing over empire. Seeing Sarah so frail from her history of humiliating poverty, yet rushing to their aid, deepened the upheaval, a love rooted in deep responsibility that left him numb with the weight of it all. Sarah knelt beside them, her soft voice polite, yet filled with moving emotion. "You are both safe now, thanks to her bravery." Tears streamed down her face as the unfairness struck violently. The rescued woman who had endured so much now, witnessing a child's sacrifice, and the powerful man's willingness to risk everything. The psychological shock was extreme, her burning attachment surging into overwhelming trust while fear for their future tore at her. In the condensed stillness that followed, with the rival threat retreating and help arriving, Lily whispered to Vin, "I helped like you, help us." The moment was deeply moving, the child's innocent act exposing the true cost of loyalty and the healing power of kindness amid betrayal. Vin held the girl tightly, his sharp blue eyes glistening with raw torment. His wealth, the yacht's security systems, medical resources, and loyal crew who now contained the betrayer stood in stark contrast to the pitiful misery Sarah had known and the vulnerability the children still faced. The inner tearing grew more intense than ever, remorse and love clashing in a storm that demanded change. The night's shocking betrayal and Lily's life-threatening sacrifice had altered everything. The bond had been tested by fire, and in the quiet after the crisis, a new resolve began to form amid the vast sea and the uncertainties that still lay ahead. The voyage continued, but the hearts aboard had been forever marked by this night of courage, remorse, and profound connection. The superyacht, the Horizon, drifted dangerously in the tense waters of late October 2025, its once smooth passage now hampered by the fallout from the previous night's betrayal and the broader conflicts rippling from the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian forces had tightened controls on the vital shipping lane, with reports of mines, drone swarms, and missile threats, forcing vessels into cautious, circuitous routes. The yacht's advanced systems kept it stable, but the emotional weight aboard felt heavier than any physical storm. Luxury surrounded them: polished decks, soft lighting, and resources that could sustain them for months. Yet it only sharpened the contrast with the inner turmoil that now threatened to overwhelm everyone. Sarah Thompson stood on the enclosed deck, her thin, malnourished frame trembling slightly under the soft quilt she clutched. The absolute extremity of her former poverty still clung to her like a shadow, hollow cheeks from weeks of hunger, eyes heavy with the memory of sleep-deprived nights spent shivering in Chicago alleys where the cold wind cut through her thin coat like knives. She had endured the most humiliating misery, begging with a soft, timid voice for scraps at soup kitchens, only to be ignored or pitied, losing her last belongings to theft on a freezing night when despair felt endless. Unreasonable injustices had torn her apart without mercy: the sudden daycare closure that left her penniless, the eviction, while she cared for her brother, the theft that stripped her of every remnant of security. These memories made the yacht's immense wealth feel both miraculous and cruel in its intensity. The comfortable furnishings, the medical supplies that had treated wounds, the security that had contained the betrayer. At times she still felt desperate and powerless, a deeply pitiful figure haunted by her past. At other moments, confusion and fear surged, bringing dizziness that made the deck seem to sway and a numbing pain to settle deep in her limbs. Lily and Mia stayed close to her, their small faces pale after the previous night's chaos. Sarah's voice remained soft and polite as she comforted them. "We are together, and that is what matters." she whispered gently, her tone reflecting her young age and the powerful man whose protection had become their anchor. Inside, however, her heart tore with violent intensity. The passionate, burning attachment she felt for Vincent Harlan had grown into an overwhelming trust from the very first moment he had rescued her from that dark alley. Yet horror and anxiety now mixed with deep disorientation. The shocking bravery of Lily's sacrifice the night before, combined with the betrayal from within, left her numb and dizzy with the unfairness of it all. Vin stood at the railing, his tall, fair-skinned frame rigid as he stared into the dark waters. The reopened wound on his arm throbbed, but it was nothing compared to the storm raging inside him. His wealth displayed itself with unrelenting intensity, the superyacht's state-of-the-art stabilization, the loyal crew who had neutralized the betrayer, the resources that had summoned distant help. This floating empire built through years of power and success now felt like a cage around his tormented soul. The shocking twist escalated as the night deepened. Damage from the previous confrontation had weakened one of the yacht's secondary systems, causing it to drift perilously close to a reported minefield zone amid the Hormuz-related tensions. Alarms sounded across the bridge. The vessel lurched in a sudden evasive maneuver, and Vin, still recovering, lost his balance on the wet deck. He fell hard, striking his head and reopening his wounds severely. Blood flowed freely as he lay stunned, the pain sharp but secondary to the terrifying realization that the yacht could drift into real danger. In that critical moment, the breaking point arrived. Vin's raw breakdown unfolded in the dim deck lights. He clutched the railing, his powerful frame shaking not from physical pain, but from the overwhelming emotional weight. "I cannot keep doing this," he whispered hoarsely, his voice cracking under the torment. "All my power, all this wealth, and still I bring danger to those I should protect." Remorse consumed him like a violent fire. He thought of the single mother he had abandoned years ago. The child who was likely his own biological daughter, Lily, whose existence he had only recently confirmed through private documents. Guilt tore at him with ferocious intensity, mixing with the fierce, passionate love he felt for Sarah and the children. This love, rooted in deep compassion and fatherly responsibility, had burned from the first moment he saw Sarah in her desperate state. It had become the compelling focal point of his life, demanding he choose healing over the empire that had defined him. Mia, the loyal best friend who had once distrusted the scary, powerful man, stepped forward in this raw moment. Her small voice revealed deeper truths about their disadvantaged lives. "We never had anyone fight for us before," she said quietly, tears in her eyes. "Not like this. Not when it cost something." Her words exposed the harsh realities of vulnerable children. The instability, the fear, the longing for someone who would stay. Then Lily, the main child whose innocent kindness had repeatedly healed Vin's wounds, delivered the clearest message of all. She crawled to his side despite the chaos, pressing a handmade paper heart into his blood-stained hand. On it, in childish crayon, she had written, "You are my real daddy now." The simple words struck Vin like a thunderbolt. The shocking emotional reckoning crashed over him. Lily was indeed his biological daughter, the child he had unknowingly failed. The revelation, combined with her unwavering compassion, shattered the final walls around his heart. Sarah watched the scene, horror and anxiety flooding her, as dizziness caused her to lose balance for a moment. She steadied herself against the railing, numbness spreading through her body from the stress and the memory of her own pitiful past. The psychological shock was extreme and violently tearing the once desperately poor woman who had endured cold winds and humiliating rejection now witnessed a powerful man breaking open before a child's love. Her burning attachment to Vin surged with passionate intensity mixed with profound empathy and fear for what this reckoning would mean. Vin held the paper heart tightly, tears finally breaking free as he pulled Lily close. "You healed me when nothing else could," he said, his voice raw with moving depth. "You showed me what real strength is." The inner conflict reached its most violent peak. The ruthless Mafia boss whose world demanded control versus the man whose remorse and love now demanded complete change. He could no longer continue the life of shadows. The betrayal, the near-disaster Lily's sacrifice, and her innocent message of healing had forced a full emotional reckoning. His protective love for Sarah and the children, especially the biological bond with Lily, burned brighter than any empire. In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed the maneuver's success and the stabilization of the yacht, the group gathered close. The rival threat had been neutralized earlier by loyal crew, but the real turning point was this raw, human moment. No further confrontations arose in the immediate hours, yet the tension of the drifting and the minefield risk had escalated the drama to its highest point, leaving everyone shaken. Sarah knelt beside them, her soft voice polite, yet trembling with emotion. "You are not alone anymore, sir. None of us are." Her words carried the weight of her own journey from suspicion in that alley to this overwhelming passionate trust. The mindset of someone once powerless, now protected and cherished by a wealthy man, created a numbing, confusing surge that left her heart full of tears and hope. Vin looked at Sarah, his sharp blue eyes filled with raw vulnerability. The disparity between his vast wealth and her history of enduring humiliating poverty only deepened the moving intensity of the moment. He felt the violent tearing inside reach its climax, remorse for every past failure, now transformed into fierce determination to choose a new path. Lily's paper heart remained clutched in his hand as the first hints of dawn touched the horizon. The shocking twist of the breaking point and full emotional reckoning had changed everything. The once hardened Mafia boss had been brought to his knees not by enemies or wealth, but by the innocent kindness of a little girl who carried his blood and the compassionate woman who had guided the healing. In this profound stillness, amid the vast sea, amid the lingering risks of the voyage, a new resolve began to form, one that would lead to redemption, protection, and the full acceptance of family. The inner worlds of Vin and Sarah had been violently torn apart and slowly pieced together through compassion, sacrifice, and truth. The tension had reached its peak, but in its wake lay the possibility of genuine healing and a future neither had dared to imagine. The superyacht the Horizon finally found calmer waters as October 2025 drew to a close, its sleek hull catching the first soft light of dawn after the long, perilous night. The immediate threats from the Strait of Hormuz tensions had eased with shifting diplomatic currents and the arrival of coordinated maritime support, allowing the vessel to steer toward safer passages. Yet the true resolution unfolded not on the bridge or through any external negotiation, but in the quiet hearts of those aboard. Luxury surrounded them with increasing intensity. Polished wood gleaming under gentle lights, soft quilts draped over comfortable seating. Advanced systems ensuring every comfort, while the memory of Sarah Thompson's past poverty stood in heartbreaking contrast. Sarah stood on the deck, her thin, malnourished frame still showing the deep traces of absolute deprivation. She had once been deprived of food for days, deprived of sleep during endless, cold, wind-filled nights in Chicago. Alleys where hunger and fear left her shivering and powerless. The humiliation had been profound, begging with a soft, timid voice for any scrap of kindness, only to face indifference, losing her last belongings to theft, while the wind howled mercilessly. Unreasonable injustices had battered her without mercy, the sudden loss of her teaching aide position, the eviction that came while she cared for her brother, the absurd cruelty of strangers taking what little she had left. These memories made the yacht's wealth feel both like grace and a painful mirror. At times she still felt desperate and powerless, a deeply pitiful shadow of her former self. At other moments, confusion and lingering fear brought dizziness and numbness, a deep disorientation that reminded her how suddenly life could shift. Lily and Mia stayed close, their small faces peaceful in the morning light. Sarah's voice remained soft and polite as she spoke to them. "The night has passed, and we are still together," she whispered gently, her tone carrying the quiet strength of someone who had endured much, yet chose compassion. Vincent Van Harlen stood nearby, his tall, fair-skinned frame no longer rigid with command, but softened by the weight of revelation. The previous night's breaking point had left him forever changed. His wealth, the superyacht's every comfort, the loyal crew who had secured the vessel, the resources that had protected them through crisis, now felt secondary to the profound emotional reckoning he had faced. Remorse gnawed at him with final consuming intensity as he looked at Lily, the biological daughter he had unknowingly failed years ago. Guilt over the single mother he had walked away from mixed with the fierce, passionate love that had burned in his heart from the moment he rescued Sarah. This love, rooted in deep compassion and fatherly responsibility rather than romance, had become the compelling focal point of his life. It drove him to see beyond power and skin color, to recognize that true connection transcended wealth and poverty. The violent inner conflict that had torn him apart, the ruthless boss, versus the man yearning for redemption, finally resolved into clarity. He chose humanity. In a quiet, condensed emotional stillness on the deck at dawn, Vin knelt before Lily. He held the handmade paper heart she had given him now, slightly stained but treasured. "You are my daughter," he said, his voice rough, with moving depth. "My own blood. I failed you before I even knew you existed, but I will never fail you again. I will protect you and raise you as my own, fully openly with all that I am." Lily's small arms wrapped around his neck, her innocent kindness healing the last wounds in his heart. Mia watched her earlier distrust fully melted into acceptance, revealing the deeper truths of vulnerable children who simply needed someone to stay. Sarah watched the powerful father-child moment, tears flowing freely. Horror and anxiety from the night's dangers gave way to overwhelming joy mixed with shock and deep disorientation. Dizziness briefly returned as the contrast between her former pitiful poverty and this scene of love overwhelmed her. The psychological shock was profound. Someone once desperately poor and humiliated on the streets was now witnessing a wealthy, powerful man embrace his child and extend protection to all of them. Her burning attachment to Vin had transformed into a passionate, intense respect and shared compassion that transcended any boundary of wealth or background. Love, she realized in that moment, knew no skin color and could not be separated by riches or rags. Vin turned to Sarah, his sharp blue eyes filled with gratitude. "You brought the light that showed me the way. Without your patience and kindness, I would still be lost in shadows. You taught me that true strength lies in compassion, not control." His remorse had evolved into a quiet resolve. He would step back from the darker aspects of his empire, focusing instead on legitimate work and raising the children with Sarah's guidance as a trusted partner in care. The disparity between his vast resources and her history of enduring cold, hungry nights only made the moment more moving. Wealth could provide safety, but only love and knowledge could truly heal. As the sun rose higher, painting the water in golden hues, the group shared a simple breakfast on the deck. The girls laughed softly, their drawings of our family scattered around them. In these final moments aboard the Horizon, life lessons emerged naturally from every situation. The power of patience revealed the first knowledge of healing broken hearts. The courage of a child offered the important lesson that innocence can guide even the hardest souls. The willingness to learn from one another brought the valuable education of true connection. Facing betrayal taught the essential knowledge that trust must be earned through actions. Choosing family over power delivered the profound lesson that real legacy lives in relationships. Supporting one another despite differences provided the clear education that compassion bridges every divide. And embracing redemption showed the deepest knowledge that change is always possible when love leads the way. The story of the Horizon reminds us that knowledge grows when we open our hearts, that every lesson shapes us toward better understanding, and that true education comes from living with kindness rather than fear. Knowledge of our shared humanity strengthens us all, while the lesson of forgiveness frees the soul. Education in compassion teaches us to see beyond surface differences, and the knowledge that love transcends wealth and poverty brings lasting peace. Each lesson we learn and every piece of knowledge we gain through hardship ultimately leads to the education of the heart. As the yacht approached a safe harbor, Vin looked at Sarah, Lily, and Mia with quiet determination. "We will build a new life together, one rooted in care, not power. You have all given me back my humanity." Sarah smiled softly, her voice timid yet warm. "And you gave me hope when I had none." In this powerful father-child ending, Vin fully accepted Lily as his daughter, vowing to protect and raise her with unwavering love, while extending the same compassionate shelter to Mia and guidance to Sarah. Wealth and poverty could not separate the bonds of compassion that had formed across every difference of background or skin color. If this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with others so we can enjoy many engaging videos every day. How did this story make you feel? How does it connect to your own real-life experiences with family forgiveness or unexpected kindness? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. The creator truly wants to listen to the emotions from deep within your hearts. Wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Thank you for joining this journey. Goodbye for now, and we promise to see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.